in a single, devastating night. The 18-year-old sorceress Reina brought an end to a 70-year war, leaving the capital city a smoldering ruin. Her knights, witnessing the sheer power she unleashed, murmured amongst themselves, convinced Reina had exhausted her very life force and perished in the aftermath. But then, a figure emerged on the horizon, walking towards them through the dust and smoke. Disbelief rippled through the ranks. It was Reina. Back within the relative peace of her chambers, the young woman found herself muttering in confusion. "I'm not Reina," she insisted to the empty air. "I was just an ordinary reader of novels." Her bewilderment stemmed from a sudden, inexplicable reincarnation into the world of her favorite unfinished fantasy. The story followed a heroic protagonist who vanquished the tyrannical ruler of an enemy nation, forged a powerful alliance with the heroine, and together they ultimately defeated a fearsome dragon. Their triumph led to the reclamation of the lost capital, culminating in a promised happy ending that the original author had abruptly abandoned just before the grand finale. The reader couldn't fathom why the author would drop such a compelling story. More importantly, she grappled with the bizarre reality that she had reincarnated as a character who was supposed to have died even before the main events of the narrative began. Yet, here she was, alive and breathing as Reina, a lingering echo of a voice, whispering protect it, haunted her memory. Protect what? The hero's happy ending that never was? Reina decided on a course of action, passive observation. She would let the story unfold naturally, refraining from any interference, and simply watch to ensure events progressed according to the plot she remembered. A couple of weeks later, Reina was on her way to complete the basic magic training she had promised the Emperor. Afterward, she planned to retreat to her estates, lying low until the original story's timeline began. Her primary goal was simple: avoid the main characters, especially the story's notorious villain, the Fourth Prince. He was, after all, described as a complete psychopath. Fate, however, had other plans. The moment Reina stepped outside, she unexpectedly encountered the very person she hoped to avoid. The small, villainous Fourth Prince was lurking in the bushes. Reina's initial instinct was to simply ignore him, pretending she hadn't seen him at all. She casually told her maid that she had merely heard a cat. The maid, however, seemed uneasy, warning Reina to be cautious in that area and offering a nervous apology. Suddenly, a translucent system window materialized before Reina's eyes, displaying information about the Fourth Prince. Despite his tender age, the Fourth Prince's nights were filled with torment. Servants routinely spat on him and subjected him to beatings. The defenseless boy often lay awake in agony. Reina shook her head slightly, steeling her resolve not to interfere. The information was unsettling, and she felt a surge of frustration at her predicament. As Reina proceeded to lunch, she tried to push the disturbing information aside, determined to maintain her non-interventionist stance. But then, the system window piped up again, this time detailing the boy's existence. His meals consistently consisted of moldy bread, and he had never in his young life tasted warm soup. A wave of unexpected compassion washed over Reina. She found herself unable to reconcile this stark reality with her detached plan. Against her carefully laid intentions, she decided to secretly bring him some proper food. Quickly, she filled a basket with a variety of delicious treats and told her bewildered maid that she was going to feed a stray cat. Emperor Hederavan had 3 wives and 4 children. The second empress had once been a dancer. She lived a solitary existence within the palace walls and passed away too soon, leaving behind only her beauty to her son, the Fourth Prince, Kevin Raya. The emperor entrusted the young prince to the care of the current empress, who promptly sent him to live in an empty, desolate palace. Each day for the boy was marked by neglect and loneliness. He began to think that she was a monster, like from a book, and would eventually destroy everyone. After all, monsters hurt people. Then, one day, Reina was strolling through the garden, preoccupied with discussions about her marriage. She had no intention of heeding. She silenced the person speaking to her with a touch of magic. This small act did not go unnoticed, hidden amongst the bushes. The young prince found himself unexpectedly amused as she walked past his hiding spot. The boy thought she resembled a delicate purple flower, and he desperately wished to see her again. Viscountess Hart continued to visit the same secluded spot in the garden each day, and the boy would watch her from afar, a silent observer in the greenery. When her maid inquired what she was always looking at in the bushes, the Viscountess simply replied that she believed a cat lived there. The boy was relieved that he hadn't been discovered and continued his secret observations of Reina. Once more, the system window appeared, this time highlighting the boy's meager existence. He was attempting to soften bread that was as hard as stone, eating only the crumbs he could manage to break off. Meanwhile, Reina enjoyed a delicious sandwich, completely unaware of the boy's intense gaze fixed upon her. Then, with a bit of playful acting, she declared that she had brought far too much food and wouldn't possibly be able to eat it all before it spoiled. She announced that she would leave the food there because she had heard that wish-granting fairies resided in the area, and with a satisfied little smile, she departed the following day. When she returned to her usual spot, she noticed the area around the food was now adorned with beautiful flowers that had been carefully placed there for her by the fourth prince. Reina reminded herself that she couldn't get carried away by this small gesture, as she was scheduled to leave for her own domain in a week. Despite this, she found herself unable to stop bringing him food. 5 days later, her entire table was covered in a vibrant array of different flowers, all gifts from the young prince. One day, she arrived earlier than usual and almost caught him in the act. She watched, unseen, as the boy carefully arranged more flowers for her, a sweet smile gracing his small face. She noticed that his hands were covered in cuts and scrapes, yet the prince seemed genuinely happy, thrilled that he had found flowers that looked like a fairy. A thought struck Reina: an eighth child should be in the comforting embrace of a guardian. With a sudden resolve, she thought, to hell with it, and approached the young prince. The boy, startled, dropped the basket of flowers he was holding. Fear flashed in his eyes. He worried that he had greatly disappointed her, that this monster, pretending to be a fairy and giving her flowers, would disgust her. Reina looked at the boy with a serious expression. She knelt down beside him and gently began to heal the cuts on his hands with her magic. She reached out and gave him a vial of strong medicine, explaining that she wouldn't always be there to heal him with magic. Back in his lonely room, the prince clutched the box of medicine, his heart filled with a quiet joy that his fairy had helped him. Suddenly, the silence of the night was broken by the arrival of servants at his door, asking if he was asleep. The following day, the physician approached Reina, informing her that an even more effective medicine than the one he had previously given her had become available. He inquired if she would like him to prepare it. The Viscountess readily agreed. The man then asked if it wouldn't be better to use magic instead. Reina replied that magic wasn't suitable for her purposes and that the recipient of the medicine wasn't yet capable of using magic themselves. Reina considered that the young boy would indeed become a skilled mage in the future, but that was still a couple of years away. The thought brought a small, private smile to her lips. The physician, noticing this rare expression, was taken aback. He understood then that the person who would receive this gift held significant importance for her. Reina decided that the best way to deliver the medicine would be secretly, under the cover of night. That night, she made her way to the prince's room and was met by the sound of water. Approaching the door, she peered inside and witnessed a horrifying scene. Servants were tormenting the young boy, verbally abusing him and drenching him with icy water. The child was trembling with terror, shocked and enraged by what she saw. Reina immediately burst into the bathing chamber to punish the cruel servants. With a swift display of her magic, she seized them all by their throats and lifted them into the air. They choked and pleaded for mercy. It was then that the prince spoke her name. In that moment, something shifted within Reina. No longer was he just a character from a book, a villain or a tyrant. He was a child who had never known kindness, for whom abuse had become a twisted normalcy. She rushed to Kevin Raya and held him tightly. The prince, surprised by her embrace, asked why she was crying. Reina simply replied that she felt deeply sorry for him. Taking his small hand in hers, she vowed that she would take care of everything. The original ending of the novel focused on protecting the main heroes and ensuring their happy ending, but Reina's resolve now extended beyond the pages of a book. Not only would the heroes find happiness, but she swore that the fourth prince would find his own happiness as well. The next day, she requested an audience with the emperor. The emperor inquired if she had decided what reward she desired for the victory she had secured in the war between the two sons. The two great empires that had been locked in a 70-year struggle to consume one another. In the end, only one sun remained in the sky, a result the emperor had desperately sought. The emperor pondered how to retain the loyalty of such a talent as Reina, someone who seemed uninterested in both wealth and fame. The emperor declared his intention to keep Reina by his side under the pretense of further training. Did she really intend to return to her domain so soon? The viscountess stated that she wished to take on the education of the fourth prince. That would be sufficient as her reward. The emperor was taken aback, having almost forgotten about this child, born from a fleeting moment of infatuation with beauty. And now, this forgotten child had captured the attention of Reina's heart. Reina looked directly at the emperor. He chuckled softly, mentioning that several servants had disappeared the previous night. He mused that they had probably fled like rats, but then added that they had left all their belongings behind. He then casually inquired if she happened to know anything about their disappearance. Reina, however, remained focused. Why are you changing the subject? Am I not worthy to teach the prince? The emperor immediately denied this. How could someone with the blood of a dragon flowing through her veins be unworthy to teach a prince? He countered. After the death of her own teacher, only the emperor and Reina knew about her heritage. Dragons were considered the highest of all races, so rare that they appeared only once every few centuries. Years ago, her teacher had brought her before the emperor and revealed that she possessed 1/4 dragon blood. The race was considered a myth, yet the blood of a dragon flowed within Reina. The emperor had harbored a strong desire to take Reina to his own estate. Reina now questioned, "Are you planning to use the fourth prince as a hostage?" "Not at all," he replied smoothly. He then revealed a small bottle filled with a strange potion. "Your mentor gave this to me, a potion of subjugation. It has the power to control you. If you drink it and swear loyalty to me, I will give you the fourth prince, or any other you desire." Reina's voice was firm and unwavering. "I will not drink it." Meanwhile, in Reina's room, the prince was observing the flowers with evident pleasure that they had not been discarded. Still affected by his past treatment, he seemed to fear that his touch would cause them to wilt consequently. He carefully collected them using a piece of cloth. A quiet contemplation crossed his young mind. Would he have the opportunity to present her with flowers again in the following year? He hesitated to touch the delicate blooms, concerned about damaging them. Just then, the boy heard a sound from outside his door and instinctively assumed Reina had returned and was experiencing difficulty opening it. Eager to assist, he hurried to the entrance, only to find servants bowing respectfully before him. They began to treat him with appropriate deference, offering their assistance in preparing a bath. However, the prince, still wary and recalling past unpleasant experiences, became apprehensive about the hot water and retreated to his room. Where he encountered Reina, she gently stroked his hair and assured him that when he felt ready to bathe, they would dine together. Meanwhile, Reina's thoughts returned to her conversation with the emperor. She had informed him of his impending death in 12 years. The emperor had reacted with vehement disbelief, exclaiming if she was issuing a death threat and expressing his outrage. Reina calmly clarified that she would not be the cause of his demise. Utilizing her precognitive abilities, she had foreseen his death. She offered to protect him from this fate, but in return, she requested that the emperor improve the treatment of fourth prince, ensuring it was equitable to that of his other children. Reina considered internally that if Kevin Raya did not develop into the tyrant described in historical accounts, the emperor's death might potentially be averted. Observing the swiftness with which the emperor had dispatched servants to the prince, Reina noted that he was indeed deeply concerned about his predicted demise. She even noticed an improvement in the cleanliness of the palace corridors. Reina entered the dining hall and observed the prince already seated. "Well, now who is this?" she inquired with a gentle smile. The prince's lower lip trembled, and tears welled in his eyes. As he mistakenly believed Reina did not recognize him, he began to nervously loosen his hair. She was merely jesting, Reina quickly reassured him, her tone softening. "You look very handsome, Your Highness." She carefully prepared his food by cutting it into smaller portions. and they commenced their meal. At that moment, the familiar system window appeared, displaying a stark and distressing piece of information. This child once consumed rice balls mixed with sand. A wave of anger surged through Reina. She regarded the intrusive window with a growing sense of frustration. Why present this painful reminder now when she was endeavoring to provide him with a semblance of normalcy? The following day, as Reina was conducting a lecture, the system window once again materialized before her. Reina internally sighed. She was training mages. She needed to focus, but this time, the window displayed new information. Before him lay a single, pitiful potato, its skin marred by an incompletely removed sprout. Today's meager portion of food for Tiernan Fargan, the male protagonist of the Garden of Vetage, and the last surviving royal of the once great Tantera Empire, the final member of his lineage remaining on the surface world. The formidable sorceress Reina from the original narrative hadn't destroyed the enemy capital without reason. While the two empires clashed for dominance over the continent of Vetage, Reina had a prophetic dream. Beneath the capital of Tantera lies a place where dragons and other ancient creatures reside. And when the dragon awakens, it will obliterate the city, even though they were her enemies. Reina couldn't allow countless innocent lives to perish. In that moment, Reina stopped time, lifted the entire capital into the sky, and forced it to drift among the clouds. But the immense effort had cost her everything. She had expended all her power and died. With the fall of the capital, Tiernan's country had also fallen. Reina's thoughts turned to Tiernan. He too had endured a harsh childhood. Was the system implying she should intervene in his life as well? She had already stepped into Kevin Raya's story. If she interfered with the male protagonist's fate as well, she risked drastically altering the entire plot. A wave of apprehension washed over her. In the dim confines of a prison, slavers were conversing. They spoke of a better world for themselves after the fall of Tantera Empire. Chained by the neck, a young boy sat on the cold stone floor, listening to their callous words. Fragments of his nanny's desperate plea echoed in his mind. "Run, your highness. You are the last of the imperial family." More than a month had passed. He had survived, but without guidance. He had foolishly fallen into the hands of these vile slavers. He repeated to himself a silent mantra in the darkness. "You are a prince of the Tantera Empire. You must rebuild it." Suddenly, the door creaked open, and Reina entered. The slavers leered at her. "Pick your prize," one grunted. Her gaze settled on Tiernan. She tossed them a heavy pouch of gold coins, and they roughly shoved the boy towards her. They moved to brand him as a slave, but Reina stopped them, stating that she would apply her own family's mark. The men, surprisingly compliant, handed her the keys to his shackles. They emerged into the open air, and the bright sunlight momentarily blinded the boy. Reina unlocked his chains and, extending a hand holding a sword, said, "Try to survive. I grant you your freedom." Tiernan stared at her, bewildered by her words. In a nearby bag were Vetaginia's citizenship papers and several magic stones. Tiernan's thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion. She was offering him the identity of his enemies, Reina explained. "With these papers, no one can enslave you, and it will be easier for you to find work when you're older." The boy recoiled, pushing her hand away. "I don't need this," he spat, throwing the documents and stones to the ground. He refused to accept help from an enemy. Rena's voice was firm, devoid of sentimentality. "Don't think of it as help. Just take it and survive. I am the one who bought you." She then stated that he was free to live as he wished. The boy continued to press, asking her name, but Reina vanished into thin air. A small, determined smirk touched the boy's lips. "Someday," he murmured, "I will find you again," and with that, he walked away. Reina hoped he would survive. After all, he was the male lead. She had also placed a tracking spell on his citizenship papers. When Tiernan eventually discovered she was the Reina who had destroyed his imperial palace, he would likely try to kill her. But that was a problem for the future. Before departing, Reina released all the remaining slaves and left. The fourth prince was already waiting for her at the entrance. The moment he saw Reina, he rushed forward to greet her. They stood for a moment, gazing at each other, before Reina gently asked, "Did you want to tell me something?" The prince tilted his head, a small, earnest expression on his face. "Welcome, Ba," he began. Reina knelt down, her eyes soft. "That's very good," she said, "but you can simply say welcome back." And then, softly, she added, "I'm home. It means you're the place I return to." The prince's eyes lit up with joy. He began to run circles around Reina, repeating, "Welcome back." Reina's heart warmed at his innocent happiness. She smiled and asked, "Would you like to be my student?" At dinner, the prince worried Reina would discover he was a monster, as he truly wished to become her student. Reina asked if he agreed, and the prince awkwardly nodded. Reina felt relieved. Dawn broke, and the emperor summoned her, declaring her new obligation to tutor the fourth prince. Reina immediately grasped the true meaning behind his words for the emperor. The prince was merely a convenient replacement for the obedience potion. Delighted, Reina realized everything was unfolding precisely as she'd planned. This meant she could finally enjoy a peaceful break. Before the original plot even began, she approached the prince, inviting him to join her on an upcoming trip to her small estate in Haibai. With a somber expression, the prince simply asked if she feared monsters. "No," Reina confidently retorted, "I'm stronger than any of them." After much deliberation, the prince finally agreed, and they soon embarked on their journey. As they traveled, Reina watched the prince, so full of joy and sweetness, and couldn't fathom how anyone could ever deem him a monster. She thought the author should have transmigrated the story themselves, given such a cruel backstory for the boy. Upon their arrival, a knight announced they'd make camp in a nearby village. Night descended, and the Viscountess gently put the prince to bed, quickly drifting off herself. But in the dead of night, she abruptly awoke to a chilling realization. They were under ambush. She rushed to wake the prince, only to find his bed empty. The criminals were already fleeing with the prince in a sack. They had received orders from the empress to kill everyone except Reina Hart. They had given her a sleeping draft. They thought their path was clear until stones suddenly rained down upon them. Reina appeared before them, asking if a child was truly in their sack. Panic seized the criminals at the sight of Reina. They knew she was an opponent they could never defeat, their bodies freezing in terror. Reina swiftly dealt with them before rushing to check on the prince. She breathed a sigh of relief, seeing he was unharmed. Of course, she thought, he's the main villain. He wouldn't die so easily. A system window popped up, confirming the empress was behind the attack. She must see him as a threat to the throne, Reina mused. But how could anyone be so cruel to an innocent child? She picked up His Highness and entrusted him to the knight she trusted most, instructing him that she was leaving on urgent business. Then, she departed to pay the empress a visit. Reina cut down all of the empress's knights before confronting her directly, demanding to know if she had sent them. The empress stammered in fear, claiming ignorance. "I see," Reina replied, using her powers to lift a knight into the air. He immediately confessed that the empress herself had given the order to kill the prince. The empress began to shriek, claiming she was being framed. Reina found the accusation absurd, wondering what was so special about this royal family that they would despise an innocent child so deeply. Kevin Riak had left the palace without so much as an apology, and now they were trying to kill him. The empress continued to insist on her innocence, pleading that the boy was like her own son. "I believe you," Reina stated, "so neither of you can be convinced as the ones behind it. Unless, of course, you wish for me to return." With that, she vanished before their eyes. When the prince opened his eyes the next morning, he was disoriented but beamed with joy upon seeing Reina. Reina scooped him up, announcing their arrival in Haibai and suggesting to sleep longer. She was visibly pleased, knowing there was nothing better than a long rest. Watching her, Kevin Riak smiled, murmuring how much he loved her. Meanwhile, the knights were discussing Reina's estate. One remarked that for someone of her power, the manor seemed rather modest. Another noted that Haibai genuinely lived up to its reputation as a quiet place. It's desolate. They speculated that Haibai might have fallen into disrepair while Lady Reina was away fighting in the war. Suddenly, an old town resident approached them. He had heard Reina had returned and, upon seeing her, immediately rushed forward. Bowing before Reina, he began to plead for salvation. She didn't understand what they needed saving from. Reina had hoped to finally rest in Haibai, but the villagers had already sought her out. The war had severely damaged the village and its harvest, and now the residents were asking her to personally inspect the lands. "Huh," Me, personally, Reina exclaimed in surprise. This greatly angered a small child from the village, who began to glare at her, thinking she was merely a warmonger. He believed she hadn't come to save them, and saw them as nothing but a nuisance. The prince abruptly lunged at the child, asking if he was Reina's enemy. But Reina quickly separated them, assuring the prince the child was no foe, which surprised him given how fiercely Boy had been glaring at her. Other villager asked if Ren was all right. Reina pondered. Even if she wasn't a soft-hearted ruler, she would never abandon her lands and people. She recalled that in her absence, she had asked the king to send knights to protect her lands, but it seemed the king had sent no one, breaking his word. Reina looked at the sad faces of the villagers and agreed to inspect everything. When she arrived, she rebuilt destroyed houses, oversaw bridge construction, and landscaped the area. She continued until the town was completely restored. Grateful residents gathered various gifts for her, filling an entire cart. A knight observed the young prince and wondered if it was normal for him to be sitting in a cart instead of a carriage, but the prince didn't care. He watched Lady Reina with admiration, captivated by her ability to help people with her magic. A wave of sadness washed over him as he realized he could never be like Reina. He was a monster, capable only of destroying other monsters. Seeing the prince's dejection, the knight asked if he was uncomfortable. The man then began talking about how amazing magic truly was, and asked about sorcerers in the palace. But the prince remained silent. Undeterred, the knight continued his attempts to draw the prince into conversation. He told the prince he was very lucky to have Reina herself as his teacher. He then asked if the prince would also be learning magic from her. The prince, bewildered, asked, "Why would I learn magic?" He almost blurted out that he was a monster, quickly covering his mouth with his hands. The knight explained that Lady Reina would be disappointed if the prince didn't learn magic. He recounted an instance where Reina, overhearing other knights discussing how she had taken the prince purely out of pity, immediately stood up for him, declaring he would become a great mage. Hearing these words, the prince's eyes shone with joy. Seeing Reina, he ran to her and announced that he wanted to learn magic, to which Reina, with a smile, replied that she would teach him for as long as he wished.